Hello, everyone, and here we go with pedigrees. Oops. Oh, I had the eraser on. Pedigrees, part one. All right, so a lot of human diseases, disorders are influenced by genetics. Okay, so studying human genetics by doing crosses with humans isn't really done. First of all, it takes too long to do a human cross. And second of all, people don't really say, okay, you mate with him, then mate with him, then mate with her, then mate with her, then mate with her. It doesn't really work. So normal breeding techniques don't work with humans. So we use family history in order to study past crosses that have already happened. Okay. And we look at records extending across several generations in the form of a pedigree. So first, so pedigree analysis is usually combined with molecular genetics technology, which we're going to do in another couple chapters, to try and figure out how these genes work. Okay. And from these studies, we have discovered the genes for sickle cell anemia, hemophilia, muscular dystrophy, Marfan's. That's what is it? Swimmer dude, Michael Phelps has Marfan's, cystic fibrosis, and a lot of other genetic disorders. Okay, here's a little how-to on reading of a pedigree. A square is a male, a circle is a female. Okay, and a line between the two indicates a mating, not a marriage, a mating, although often it also involves marriage. Okay. All right. And then the boxes, the squares or circles coming off of a mating are the offspring from that mating. Okay. Colored in all the way is affected with the trait. Clear is unaffected or normal. Okay. And halfway is a carrier, a heterozygote. And if there's a question mark there, it means you can't determine the genotype from the pedigree. Okay, so in here it looks a little bit. So here is a male, here's a female that have mated, and they've had these offspring. Okay. All right. So there are, as much as we've been talking about human genetics exhibiting multiple alleles, polygenic, pleiotropy, epistasis, all that kind of stuff, there are a lot of human genes that are just caused by single genes, okay? Freckles, cleft chin, dimples, okay? And they are inherited in just normal Mendelian fashion, okay? So there's a dominant allele and a recessive allele, and it just works the normal way, okay? When new alleles get produced via mutations, they usually encode for non-functional proteins. Okay. And that way, the non-functional alleles are usually recessive, and they are the ones that cause the disorder, usually recessive and cause whatever disorder we're looking at. Okay. Heterozygous individuals, as we know, are called carriers of a recessive trait. Okay, so they have a normal allele and they appear normal, but they are carrying the trait for the disease and can pass it on to their offspring. Okay, recessive genes are more likely to occur. Okay, you get homozygous when related individuals have children. Okay, and this is why it's best that, like cousins don't marry. Okay, that's called a consanguinous, Sanguinous mating. Okay, consanguinous means same blood. Okay, so when you have close relatives mate, that's much more likely, because it runs in the family, that they'll be heterozygotes for a recessive allele, and much more likely that they will produce a homozygous recessive offspring. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of genetic disorders kind of quickly, just to give you some background information on some of the disorders you should be familiar with. Okay, first one is albinism. Okay, a defect in the production of melanin, and melanin is the pigment in the skin which gives colors to skin cells. Okay, melanin is produced by the enzyme tyrosinase, and the allele for tyrosinase is the TOIR gene. Okay, and if it is defective, there will be no melanin produced in the skin, and that condition is called albinism. Okay, so humans are homozygous, and again, this is normal recessive. This is a recessive disease, recessively inherited, and they have no pigment in skin, fur, or eyes. You see, here's some example. There's an albino wallaby, and here's an albino human. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Down. All right, another genetic disorder that is inherited in this manner, normal recessive allele, is the gene for sickle cell anemia. Okay, and this has to do with our hemoglobin. We talked about this when we talked about protein, structure, and function. Okay, mutant hemoglobin gene causes the protein, a subunit of the protein, of the quaternary structure of the protein, to have the wrong shape, have the wrong structure, so it doesn't function properly in making the tetramer of hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin molecules clump together rather than staying separate. Okay, this causes red blood cells to take on the shape of a sickle or a crescent, like this. You know, the death carries the scythe, the sickle, and this can cause blood clots to form. Oxygen doesn't get transported very well, and this condition is known as sickle cell anemia. And actually, let's kind of zoom. So here are my sickle-shaped blood cells, and this is kind of what they look like. This is a normal blood cell. Normal. Sickle. Oh, it says right down at the bottom. Okay, so let's talk about it. Sickle cell anemia. People who are homozygous for the sickle cell gene have only defective hemoglobin and produce the most sickled cells. Okay, heterozygotes, about half normal and half abnormal hemoglobin. So they have a few sickled cells, but they're not seriously effective, so they appear normal. Okay. So sickle cell anemia is therefore considered a recessive disorder. Now, this is the interesting part. Okay. Sickle cell anemia is actually much more common in sub-Saharan Africans and African Americans, and the allele is extremely rare in Caucasians. And why this is that if you are a heterozygote, you're a carrier for the sickle cell allele, that actually gives you resistance to malaria. So heterozygotes are actually selected for in African cultures, and because malaria is much more common in Africa, and it gives them resistance. So because carriers are enriched in that population, it's much more likely for them to create a homozygous recessive offspring. Okay. And again, because malaria is much more rare in northern climates, and that's where Caucasians normally live, the disease is extremely rare in Caucasians. Okay. All right. So, that's it. All right. Well, that's it for part 1. So, end part 1 and go find part 2.